Hey folks, nice to be back with you. Had a little bit of a break there, and here I am. It turns out I'm still in the basement, so at least that hasn't changed. It's going to be an interesting week for a lot of us. And for my viewers nationally, I understand that many of you have gone back and done this already. You'll have to forgive me for being a week behind the time. In Toronto, where I live, the schools are actually just reopening this week. So that is kind of the real return to normal as far as I'm concerned. It's been actually 6 months to the day for my family and I since we began this weird period, and it's gonna be this week that something big happens. The return to school will feel like a real psychological point of getting back to normal. There was an interesting kind of confluence of events this week, though, that made me think of how slow off the mark Canada is. Let's be honest about one big thing here. Canada has done better than the United States, and I don't want to pretend otherwise. But the problem in Canada, as so often is the case, particularly with healthcare, we only compare ourselves to Americans. As long as Canada is doing incrementally better than the United States in any comparison, Canadians declare victory and go home. We don't look around the world. We don't look to Europe. We don't look to other countries that are actually, in some cases, better comparisons to Canada, as long as we're doing better than the Americans. Right now, in terms of the pandemic, we are doing better than the Americans. But that's not the entire conversation. We are not doing as well as we should be. Last week, the federal government and the city of Toronto announced that they're going to be opening an isolation facility, a quarantine facility for people who may need to go into a 14-day isolation period. Maybe they've had a positive COVID test, but they're not symptomatic, or they're returning from abroad and they don't have a place to safely quarantine. So there's going to be kind of a quarantine facility that will be operated by Toronto, funded by the feds. It's really, really good idea. 6 months late. It took them 6 months to figure out that in the country's largest city, we might need a quarantine facility. We shut the schools down when this thing began to get out of control in March. We needed a quarantine facility in March. We're getting the quarantine facility when we're reopening the schools. I don't make any predictions about the future. I think if 2020 has taught us anything, that's this is not a good idea. But we could, in fact, be opening this facility that we desperately needed during the first wave just in time for the second wave. Maybe it'll be useful. Maybe we'd get good use out of it. I'm not saying it still might not find a way to be helpful, but it just goes to show you that, on a week where we're reopening the schools after a 6 month pause, on a week when at least my family is crossing their 6 month mark of this weird new era, on a week when we've been hearing a lot of reports about how Canada was not even listening to its own privately developed pandemic early warning system, we're finding out that the federal government is ready to go ahead and take the kind of steps that should have been taken 6 months ago. I'm actually in some ways sympathetic to our government. I get it. Like, there was a lot going on. Governments have limited bandwidth. But if it takes you 6 months to get your quarantine facility up and running, sooner or later, I hope somebody decides to look into why it took us so long to get our act together.